Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, October 4th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Michigan State game is in 4 days, the game against Michigan in 53 days. The present is looking pretty good for the 2022 Buckeyes, who are ranked number 3 in the nation, sitting at 5-0 as they near the halfway point of the regular season. The future, well, that's not looking too bad either. The Buckeyes 2023 recruiting class is also ranked 3rd in the nation, and there's some big names still out there as potential additions. So we are going to be talking recruiting today. My guest is Marc Givler of BuckeyeHuddle.com. He just released his latest edition of his Skull Session column. We're going to be talking about some of the stuff that was in there. Marc, thanks for being here.
Yep, good to be here.
So things are in decent shape in most of the position groups for 2023 already. They got 20 commits right now, and as I mentioned, 3rd in the nation. If you're 3rd in the nation, you're in decent shape. But there are still a few spots where they would kind of undoubtedly like to add another player. One of those is linebacker. They missed on a couple other guys who we had been talking about as sort of top targets for a while. And we've talked about them trying to flip some of those guys maybe back, but it's starting to look like they may end up going in a different direction. So what can you tell us about the linebacker class right now?
Yeah, I think they're at a point where they'd like to add another one, and they're not going to push it and stretch things if it's a guy that they're not sold on, but it's definitely looking like linebacker. Adding one more linebacker is probably taking priority over, say, adding another running back, which I think is still slightly possible as well, but it sounds like linebacker is more of a need at this point in terms of numbers. So they're looking at some new options. They're still working on some old options, but that's probably not in great shape right now. So new offer out to Orion Carter out of Smyrna, Tennessee, which is just southeast of Nashville. That went out this past week. And this is a kind of a fast rising name. So there's some new names starting to kind of sprout up.
Well, and they had a few significant targets on campus last weekend. The Rutgers game is, I think you could probably guess, since it is the Rutgers game, probably not the biggest recruiting weekend of the year, but there were several names that were like, oh, I know who that is, as they were coming down the tunnel. So you wrote about a bunch of those guys in your Skull Session column, guys who were visiting on campus last week. Just go ahead and give us one of the folks who was here on campus last week, just what people should know about where things stand with him and his recruitment right now.
Yeah, I think one of the more interesting situations that developed this past week was David Hobbs. He's a top, at least one site's got him a 5-star. Most sites have him as a 4-star, top 200 type of guy. Interior defensive lineman out of Concord, North Carolina. He was offered, I believe Thursday or Friday, then visited this weekend. So kind of was basically offered as he was making his way to campus, essentially. But this is a guy, they're looking for another defensive tackle. They had Caden McDonald in recently for an official. They're still fighting that battle. That's going to be kind of a tough pull out of the South, but they're in that one. Now they're trying to get involved with Hobbs. Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, just a few of the schools to watch there. I think the one interesting note here is that this was an unofficial visit, so he can come back for an official later. I'm sure that's the goal here for Ohio State, is to get him back later for an official. He has a official to Alabama, I think, in late October, and then an official to Georgia in November. So I think Ohio State would be best served to try and get him on campus for that Michigan game at the end of November, so they can kind of combat this. Obviously, you just offered a guy this week. You're kind of playing from behind a little bit, and those big guys from North Carolina are historically tough to pull north anyway. So just something getting the ball rolling there. So I want to kind of keep an eye on here moving forward the next few weeks. And again, as we kind of mentioned with linebacker earlier, as they're looking for another linebacker, they're also looking for another defensive tackle in this class. That's probably, other than the defensive ends that we've talked about a million times, adding one more good defensive tackle to this class is probably their next biggest priority.
Yeah, if you're talking about an interior defensive lineman from the South and he's got Alabama and Georgia offers and official visits coming up, I feel like you don't really need to tell us where he's ranked. That kind of paints the picture for you that if Alabama and Georgia are chasing a guy, he's probably okay. That is my professional opinion. Your mileage may vary. We also need to look way, way, way into the future. We're talking 2023, and it's like, wow, it's already almost 2023. That's crazy. Marc, let's talk 2026. I'm not sure I'm ready to talk 2026, but let's talk 2026. 2026 receiver out of American Heritage. That is the same big-time South Florida program that has produced 2023 commits Brandon Ennis, Mark Fletcher. Now, it is pretty rare that you would even know the name of guys that far out, but it sounds like the Buckeyes are potentially very interested in someone on that 2026 class out of American Heritage already, and they might even have a little head start in recruiting him. Can you sort of explain who that is and why they might have a little bit of a head start out of a South Florida kid?
Yeah, Malachi Toney has emerged as one of American Heritage's top players already this season as a freshman. He's starting at wide receiver alongside Brandon Inniss, of course, Ohio State's 2023 commit. And he's racking up offers. He's got over a dozen offers already. I think Auburn was the latest major program to offer him in the past week. Wearing the Ohio State decal on his helmet, hearing a lot about the Buckeyes from Mark Fletcher and Brandon Inniss. Brandon Inniss has put him on the phone with Ryan Day and Brian Hartline already, so that's unusual, I think, for Ryan Day to be talking to a freshman from out of state on the phone. So Brandon Inniss has kind of been the go-between there, and he's hearing a lot, again, from Fletcher and Inniss about Ohio State. And I was talking to him this week a little bit, and he just said, I haven't even been to Ohio State, but I already love it. I love the program, and he's been encouraged by talking to those coaches. He had 2 touchdowns a couple weeks ago on Friday night when Brian Hartline and Perry Eliano were down there watching the game. So he's already made a good impression in front of a couple of Ohio State coaches. So, I try not to get too hyped up about freshmen, but this kid's pretty special. Wears number 10. I think that's a nod to Tyreek Hill, and he plays that way. He's 5'10"-ish. He's not 6'1", 6'2". He's about 5'10", but he is an absolute blur. He can absolutely fly.
Well, and I think this is one of those things where, I was kind of joking earlier about, if you see a guy, an interior defensive lineman with Alabama and Georgia offers, like that tells me all I need to know about the guy. A 2026 guy who is starting for American Heritage. I mean, that's probably a name that Ohio State fans kind of know because they've pulled some guys out of there, and obviously they've got a couple guys from the 2023 class. But can you put in perspective the level of talent that is at American Heritage and what it means for a freshman to not just be, on the varsity and maybe contributing a little bit, but to be starting at a really premium position? That is a school that is known for producing some skill talent over the years.
Yeah, it's shocking, to be honest, how big of a part of their offense he is already with Fletcher and Inniss already there. And if you're a skill guy at American Heritage, you're probably a Division I college prospect as far as their starting lineup goes. There are very few guys from a skill perspective in that starting lineup who aren't going to play major college football. So to be doing that as a freshman, again, he's just he's so far ahead of the curve in terms of his ability to run by people and just run routes, and the way he separates already at such a young age, and his concentration level and hands, it was really impressive. He had kind of put some clips on Twitter a few weeks before I went down there to see him where he was making plays. I was like, okay, this looks really good. I was shocked they had a freshman doing that well for him, and then like I said, I was down there and 2 touchdowns and just running by people. He's it's very unusual to have a receiver as a freshman doing these things, at a place like American Heritage.
All right. And, while we're on the class of 2026, whether ready or not, here they come. There's a 2026 quarterback in Central Ohio who sounds like you may be a little bit intrigued already as well. And again, 2026, just to do the math for you, this is a freshman starting at a pretty big program in Central Ohio. So let people know about Levi Davis.
Yeah, so I'm watching Dublin Kaufman versus Olentangy Orange on Friday. I'm primarily there for Will Smith Jr., who of course committed to Ohio State as a 2023 defensive tackle. But I couldn't help but be impressed by Levi Davis. He's again not a 6'3" kid. He's 5'11", probably 170 pounds right now. He'll get bigger and stronger. But just a freshman out there facing a really good Kaufman defense. They were pressuring him, but made a lot of great throws, made a lot of throws to the opposite hash, accurate on time, showed some nice touch, kind of throwing the ball downfield. Good athlete, dual threat guy, plays point guard on the basketball floor, also a good track athlete. So I'm super intrigued by him. It's not quite the Malachi Toney situation where, Auburn and Georgia and Texas A&M have already offered. Levi's got some development to go through and some time here before I think his recruiting process will really take off, especially as a quarterback. I think, a lot of schools are going to want to see him throw here the next 2 summers. But Really intriguing kid. I like his maturity. I know a lot of people that program, and I know he's very well thought of over there in terms of off the field as well. So it's going to be interesting to watch him develop. You know, the size, I know people are going to kind of cringe at that, but look, Ohio State's recruited quarterbacks that weren't much above 6 feet tall in the past, and they haven't always landed those guys, but they've recruited those guys. I think if we've seen anything the last few years, you can play the position in the modern shotgun spread offenses. You can play it at 5'11", 6 feet tall. So he showed a lot of physical traits I was really impressed with. And again, he's only a freshman. He may grow. He may grow a couple inches. We don't know yet. But he's definitely a guy who kind of added himself to my radar screen here the next year or two.
All right, well, you can read about all sorts of guys who are on Marc's radar screen in his weekly Skull Session column that is on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Always a very popular weekly feature. You got to be a member to read it, and you got to be a member to read Alex Gleitman's ADEC column, who also is an absolutely killer recruiting reporter for us. He talked to all sorts of guys who were on campus last weekend to get sort of their immediate feedback, where things stand with them. Lots of really, really great stuff there. All killer, no filler on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Check that out today. Also, make sure you check out our YouTube channel. Marc is part of our post-game coverage for all those games that we'll have another one coming up this weekend. We get to try a road game. See if we can swing this on the road. Only one way to find out. You can watch that live at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Pretty sure we'll be able to pull it off. I believe in us. I think we can do it. But those are a really, really fun show. It's usually Marc with one of our X's and O's guys, doing some immediate reaction, instant reaction stuff, giving you a little schematic breakdown of some of the stuff that Ohio State was trying to do and what worked, what didn't. Then you get the post-game coverage. Last week we had both the Ryan Day press conference and heard from some of the Buckeyes. Also gave you the Greg Schiano press conference live. There was a little interest in that as it turned out after the game. So got to hear from both coaches, got to hear from the players, got to hear Tony Gerderman and I do our instant reaction Buckeye Weekly show. It's always a lot of fun, and it is even more fun when you guys are all there to ask us questions and give us feedback and make fun of Tony, make fun of Kevin. I mean, anyone. Tony, Kevin. I mean, those are the only two people I can remember anyone making fun of on those shows. So it is a lot of fun. It's all at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you hit that bell so you get notified when we do those post-game shows. We'll have a pre-game show up there as well. Probably have some fun new segments for you. First road game of the year means probably our first dining segment of the year, so those are generally pretty popular as well. So all at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.